Good evening, everybody. My name is Jock McKenzie. I am going to be the moderator for this evening's session. This is, I guess, the second of, we hope, many Book Club Jamborees. Last year, the Book Club Jamboree was held in the Snell Gallery in the basement of the Red Deer Public Library. This year, as you will clearly be able to tell, we're live and online from Northern Alberta, Southern-ish Calgary, Alberta, and all around Red Deer, Alberta. And I'm sitting out at the farm here just east of Red Deer, Alberta. Our panelists this evening are representatives of either book clubs or the Red Deer Public Library. And they are, and I don't know if you'll be able to, I guess you're just going to be able to see each speaker one at a time, but our panel members this evening are Priscilla McLaughlin of the Fireside Book Club that's held at the Red Deer Public Library, Claire Brown, who is the facilitator for two book clubs at the library, Happily Ever After Book Club and Any Book Club, Trish Klein, who is the Adult Services Coordinator. Maybe just wave when I mention your name. Trish, there she is. Excuse me, she's the Adult, get this right here, Services Coordinator for the Red Deer Public Library. Jenna Butler, who is, there's almost too many things for me to mention here. She is the long distance at the moment instructor from Red Deer College. She is an author, she's an avid environmentalist, and she is an off-the-grid farmer. And we have also Anne Logan from Calgary, and her book club on Facebook is called the I've Read This Book Club. Little wave from Anne. And I'm not sure why I'm the moderator other than on my grade 1 report card when I attended Grandview Elementary School, they said, Jock enjoys telling of his many and varied experiences. And I guess I haven't shut up since. I am in the book club for inmates at the minimum security arm of the Bowdoin Institution. And we have not met since, luckily, I think our last meeting was on March the 13th, and all of a sudden the world changed. And that's why we're here, because the world has changed. And we are here primarily, I guess, for two reasons. The overarching reason is that we are living in crazy times. And you may have heard this far too often. The coronavirus, COVID-19, has changed everything for everybody. And at the same time, we seem to have had a dramatically sharp increase in the sad but pervasive inequalities that there are around our world. Our purpose this evening is not to bemoan COVID-19, not to bemoan the fact that there are these ongoing and very disturbing inequalities, but to consider those two things, perhaps more than others, and say, how do we put a positive, not spin, but how do we react positively? How do we deal with the old, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade kind of a deal? So this evening, we are going to cover three main areas, and I'm going to start with the first one in just a moment. I'm going to ask each of our panelists if they would react by telling us what their reading patterns, if they have changed, how they have changed. In the last 6+ months, how have your specific individual reading patterns changed in any way? Once we've heard from everybody on that topic, then we're going to get in topic 2 and topic 3 a little bit more into the specifics of the book clubs and perhaps the library in itself, if Trish, that's what you're representing here. As far as the book clubs go, topic number 2 is going to be what changes, and hopefully positive changes or necessary changes, have been made in your particular book club, or maybe book clubs that you know about. And I'm hoping that the people that are watching on Facebook, or the people that see this later, if it's uploaded to YouTube, can glean something from those ideas. Thirdly, our final one, and we don't want to end up running out of time here, so we'll keep marching along, and that is book club tips and how-tos. And these may have been changes that you've made, or they may simply be things that have worked for your club and you know that they're forever. They worked a year ago, they're going to work 10 years from now, and they're working for you right now. Because all of us struggle with a variety of things. And for the most part, I'm just going to introduce each of those topics and then call on a specific individual. And I think the best thing the moderator can do is shut up. So I'm going to do mostly that, I think, from now on. So can we start with number one? And I'll start with Trish. How have your specific reading patterns, if they have changed in the last 6-ish months?
Well, I am one of those people that COVID seemed to hit hard in changing some of my habits. And I did not read at all from about, or very little, from about March until my holidays started in July. And once my holidays started in July, I started to read an awful lot. And I'm part of Claire's Any Book Club, and I think they got to listen to my whole list after my holiday had been completed. I think, I've heard from a lot of people. And so for me, this was just, I know I'm not alone in saying that it changed things. It was maybe hard to read, and it was maybe hard to read as well, because one of the genres that I tend to like to read are very much about during World War II, and a lot of the stuff that had gone on in World War II in certain things where, we were talking about rationing things or people running for things and all of that kind of stuff, and being stuck in their homes, and, all this stuff all of a sudden became a little, not as horrible, because we could get out and we could do things, but it certainly, it was very close to what I was reading, there, and what was happening in my own home, especially during the winter.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much. Jenna, over to you.
I noticed for sure that my reading patterns slowed down quite a bit. And I think, kind of going off what Trish said, for many of us, our lives have changed. How we're processing information or retaining it has changed. So I think it's part of, we're all a bit traumatized, some more so than others. I think it's just a reality of our lives right now. So I find a shorter attention span where I would be able to kind of delve into a book at length. Now I find I'm breaking things up a little bit more. Also, as a member of a BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, people of color community, dealing with ongoing grief and trauma has also kind of reduced my ability to focus. I've lost 7 friends so far in the States who are members of that community to COVID. And so just the ability to sit and process a text has changed. So one of the things that I found I've been doing particularly, well, more so during COVID-19 than I had been before, I often read books by Indigenous, Black, people of color, but I've been doing that even more so kind of as an homage to my friends who have passed away, and also just as these questions of rights that you mentioned at the introduction kind of come into the media and come into the public eye, and more texts by these communities surface, I've been engaging with those more so. And sometimes it's hard because some of the issues that are brought up are very powerful, and they're very of the moment, and I think they're very necessary. So my writing has really changed, and I'm reading a lot more texts that punch me in the heart. And sometimes that feels pretty risky at a time like this, but necessary.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And we are going to cycle back to some of these thoughts when we talk about the book clubs, because I think some of the same questions are true of the group as a whole rather than you as individuals. But I wanted to start with that individual approach. Anne, your thoughts?
So I've actually found myself reading more. And the main reason for that is that I'm the books columnist for CBC Calgary. And so when things during the lockdown, they came to me and were like, we need more content, one of them being books, because obviously a lot of people are spending more time at home. So for that role, it's important to me that I read a wide variety of literature, even if it's not what I would necessarily pick. People react to the pandemic in different ways. And, we saw that with like Netflix, their pandemic shows like becoming really popular. So there is one book in particular that I read that had come from, the author's name is Salima Nawaz, and her book is called Songs for the End of the World. And it was originally scheduled to be published in August, like just last month, but it's all about a pandemic that it's all about a coronavirus that comes from China. And she wrote this years ago. So the publisher pushed up the publication of the ebook to March so people could read it during the lockdown. And I specifically requested this book from the publisher to review, knowing that a certain group of people would be seeking out these kind of texts. And even though I personally felt a bit anxious about reading it, I did it anyways, because I take my job very seriously as a book reviewer. But I was actually really pleasantly surprised that reading it was not difficult. It's not your typical dystopian novel. I have avoided dystopian novels as a genre, but I've just been reading widely across the board. I probably tending to a little bit lighter. But yeah, I found I was just reading more because I had to review 3 books every other week for them. So it was actually easier for me because I was stuck at home, so I had more time to read.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, so many thoughts. But as I said, we'll cycle back. Priscilla.
Well, I typically read a lot of nonfiction, but over this time period, I didn't read very much nonfiction at all. And in fact, I listened to more audiobooks and thrillers, I have to say. So I would think it was to motivate me to go for walks and work in my garden and that sort of thing, get out and keep moving. And you have an audiobook that there's a fast-paced story. Time goes quickly and you do your steps and you don't notice it so much. So that's kind of how it affected me.
Thank you. And Trish. Oh, Claire, what am I doing? Claire.
So I definitely noticed a huge change in my personal reading habits. I am a reader that reads hundreds of books a year and, finds basically all my entertainment and my relaxing and everything with books. And I had a very short attention span. I couldn't really pick up anything new. So I was rereading things or what I had been doing was I was listening to audiobooks before bed, like from before. And so I started listening to more audiobooks, but not just nonfiction, which is how I had been using audiobooks in the past. Now it was basically anything. And I really gravitated towards things that I had read before that I could listen to with much more ease than trying to, remember new character names and follow a new story because I wasn't there.
Interesting. Now, I'm not sure if it was you, Claire, or Trish, or if it was Fran Kimmel or Midgie Campbell or Suzanne Hermery or somebody in the background sent out a survey to those people who had been at last year's Book Jamboree. Who was in charge of that? Do you know?
I believe the Red Deer Arts Council spearheaded that.
Okay, so that would have been Suzanne Hermery. So thanks to her for that. And thank you so much to those people who responded. And they said things like this. Number one, audiobooks was, well, clearly they are more easily accessible. And maybe in March and April when the library was closed down. And I know that when I've been to the Red Deer Public Library, it isn't open yet. There are a gazillion books that are sitting there with little tags in them for people to come and pick up. So maybe people went to audiobooks, and I'm a huge fan of the audiobook. So that was one thing. A number of people also said that they had more time, but they also had more stress. And maybe they had more time, they weren't at work, but they were at home with the kids, their other half. And so even though they weren't working, they didn't have as much time to spend in that regard. A number of people said, maybe like you, Priscilla, that they didn't say that they were reading thrillers, but they were certainly reading things that were less dark. And I think, who else mentioned this, that they were reading things that were a little lighter. And I mean, just to find something that's different. I think most of us kind of fall into a pattern where you might be reading a particular author at length and go on and on. A number of people said they were reading a lot more news items, either watching the news, or a fellow that's on my Facebook feed said he had subscribed to the New York Times. And I'm hoping that people are reading things other than that, but that's another example. And a number of people also said that they are rereading things. I think we've seen people go full spectrum from, it's okay, I can go out, I can mix and mingle, and others that say, I'm never leaving my house. And I know a gal, I was chatting with her this morning, who said, I'm not to that extent, but I've certainly looked at my bookshelf and have looked at books either that have been sitting there and I haven't read, or I'm going to reread them. So those are some of the things that the people in the book club suggested. Now, I guess, and I don't know, Anne, if you can shed a light on this one, but the Book Publishers of Alberta, in league with the Writers Guild of Alberta, have put together a list of books about diversity and inclusion. And if you were to simply Google Book Publishers of Alberta diversity and inclusion, you will get it. And I did that in preparation for this meeting. And I think it was the 4th or 5th item that popped up on my Google search. If you want to copy it down, the specific title to go to is bookpublishers.ab.ca/diversity-and-inclusion-reading-list. So diversity and inclusion reading list, all with little dashes in between. That gets you bang immediately to the site. The site lists 24 books. It lists in a group essays, poems, and articles. And then there's a section called additional. And in the additional, there are lists of podcasts, lists of videos that you can watch. So it's kind of an all-in-one menu of things that I think many of us have said, whether it's Me Too, BIPOC, there are a number of other, I guess, hashtags that you could go to. But for a guy like me, a senior citizen, white guy, born and raised in Alberta, who clearly doesn't get it and wants to, I think it's time that we reach out and read some of those things. So if your reading patterns haven't changed, maybe this is a time that they should change. So that's the first part of our conversation. Let's go to talking more about book clubs. And the survey asked how book clubs had changed, and I'll leave that again to the end. But let's start in the middle of my little list here, and we'll start maybe with Anne. How has your book club changed? I guess it's maybe a little harder for you to tell because yours is an online book club, correct?
Yeah, so I actually started my online book club during the lockdown. I started it in March, just as a way to connect with other readers. And I really wasn't sure what I was doing other than I just wanted to talk to other readers while I was stuck at home. So I just started a Facebook group. And if you go onto Facebook, you can easily find it. It's just, if you just look up my Facebook page, I've read this. And then you go to the little blue button on the right-hand side, join group. It's a private group that you have to ask permission to join, but I let everyone in. I just ask a few questions before I approve your request. And we've been March, we just do one book a month. And I find most people are joining the group because they just want book recommendations. So I have close to 470 members on the online group, but it's usually the same 10 to 15 people who attend the live discussion. And all it is it's like this. I just run a Facebook live video. I talk and I lead the discussion, and then people write in the chat window. And that's how we have our discussion. And then I post the video on Facebook afterwards so people can watch it another time. And I get a lot of views after that as well. But I think the majority of the people who are a member of my book club are really just looking for book recommendations. I'll just keep talking because it looks like Jock's screen is sort of frozen. And one thing I do, and this is probably something more related to like the next question that he's going to ask about tips, is that I always recommend polling the group members about what they want to read next. So I just take like a picture of like, I'll usually pick 5 or 6 different books of like things that I think we should read. And then I create a Facebook poll online, and then people just vote on what they want to read next. But as like sort of like a gift for people to actually like, and to encourage them to join the live discussion, I say we're going to make the final decision during that live discussion. So it encourages people to attend. And that seems to work really well. And yeah, like the membership keeps growing, but I wouldn't say the people involved in the discussion keeps growing, but the Facebook page itself is like a discussion. It's an ongoing discussion because, you know, I post questions on there. People like to discuss the book before our meeting. And one thing that I've been really lucky in doing is that because I work directly with the publishers, I ask the publisher if they can ask the author to make a little video for us where they specifically mention like the name of my book club and like give us some 2-minute insider info about their writing process or something like that. And people seem to really like that. And it's been easy for the author to do because they're stuck at home too. So yeah, it's an interesting little group we have.
Zapped. Oops. I got disconnected there for about 1.5 minutes. So I was floating out there in cyberspace and I missed a good deal of that. So if I ask a dumb question, at least I have an excuse. You said that you meet once a month and you pick the books?
So I post pictures and people vote on them, and it's a little poll that people vote on.
I see. Okay, good. And is it a particular day of the month that you meet? That because I guess they can read things afterwards and comments and stuff, but where is there an actual online meeting?
Yes, so we do have an online meet. It's always a Thursday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And I make like a little ad for it. Like I spend 10 minutes on Canva, just make a little ad graphic, post it on. But because I have members from all across Canada. And so I only have, you know, a few people attending the actual live discussion. But I tend to just pick the meetings, the meeting date towards the end of the month, which seems to work. So people have like at least 4 weeks to read the book. But that's one of the benefits of running a book club is you can choose whatever day works for you. And I just make it fit into my schedule.
So a person, if I were to want to sit in on that particular meeting, and it is now I think, what is it, the 15th or 16th of September, have you chosen the meeting for this month?
Yeah, absolutely. So shortly after our live discussion, once we've chosen the book, I'll post the date for the next book club. I actually decide the date of the next book club and I announce it at that meeting. So I'll say, okay, guys, next time we're meeting is this day, this time. And then I post the picture and the little JPEG so people know when to log back on.
And the September meeting is?
It is September 24th, Thursday at 7 p.m.
Great. Thank you very much. So that is a week. I guess it's a week from today. So we look forward to that. Okay. I'm going to bounce around. I'm going to jump over to, I'm going to go to Jenna because you're not in a book club. So I'm going to, maybe I won't jump to Jenna right away. I'll let you think about that, Jenna, because not being in a book club, you either may know people in book clubs or have been in a book club before.
I actually am in one, but
Oh, you are? Oh, I was told that you weren't. So, well, then, okay. You're on.
it's just okay. I was sitting there going, "Do you still want me to think about it?" But
No, we don't.
just start talking. Actually, I'm in a small book club. It's a closed book club. It's with 3 friends, and it's based on books about land, because all of us focus quite a bit on land in our own. We're all writers as well. And so we kind of democratically choose what we're reading, but it does all have that connection to land and place. And we've been finding it's been really interesting, especially since March, since COVID started, thinking about how our connection and our exposure to land has shifted, right? Because so many of us are in the cities and we can't go out into the parks, or we can't go out into the neighborhoods in the same way that we might once have done. People have shifted back home. They've changed provinces, dwellings and everything. So our connection to place has totally shifted. So yeah, that has been really interesting. And we've shifted online as well. Our book club is meeting online, and the time is fluid. We've got parents who are homeschooling kids and things like that. So we've done all of this shift up since COVID. But the topic of the book club it's almost like it's gained extra resonance since the pandemic. So that was strange and unexpected.
Did you meet in person before?
Yeah, we used to meet once a month in person.
And you were all in Red Deer?
No, actually, my friends are up in Edmonton. So I would just drive up to Edmonton.
Winter included?
Winter included.
Okay.
QE2, yay fun.
Yeah. No, I know it well. I used to ride the bus to go to University in Edmonton, and we took the milk run. We stopped at every little town between Red Deer and Edmonton. That wasn't that much fun. Had some interesting stories, but not a lot of fun. So for other people to glean something from that, I know that there are book clubs that are quite small. I've never heard one that had 3 members. The Gallup 4, including yourself. Okay. Our one in the prison has 14 plus 3 volunteers, so that makes 17. And I guess there's a variety in between. For anybody out there in TV land or Facebook land, do you have anything sort of changey that happened because of the smaller numbers? Do you think that other groups might benefit from?
We definitely know a lot more about one another and how we read. I mean, we knew each other professionally going in, but we have a much stronger connection as writers and also as readers. We get a sense of which communities one another's coming from. And because it's kind of a themed book club, like we always read about land, whether it's fiction, poetry, nonfiction, what have you, we get a really broad sense of what the other is reading and why, which communities those texts are coming out of, which voices we're engaging with. So having a small book club, I think we've got a really good reading list going because we have a lot of dialogue on that theme topic.
Are you restricted to the 4 of you? What would happen if someone came knocking on your door and said, I watched this thing on Facebook about book club jamborees, and man, oh man, I'd love to be part of your book club.
I don't think we would be opposed to that idea. Nobody has so far because it's just small. It's just a group of buddies kind of getting together, and we become friends over time. But yeah, I don't think we'd be opposed to it.
I know that some groups are restricted because back in pre-COVID times, they would meet at someone's house, and they would say, we're going to meet 10 times over the course of the year and we're taking the summer off, or we're meeting 11 times over the course of the year and we're taking the Christmas season off, or something like that. So that might not be in effect anymore. And I think probably one of the other reasons I've heard book clubs exist is because of the snacks. So
Which is great if you're meeting at someone's house, for sure.
well, exactly. And I think some people have, I was at a meeting the other day and they had one person serving everyone that was at the meeting, and that seemed to go over. I'm not sure if that's COVID appropriate or not. Anyway, moving on to another book club. Let's jump over to Claire.
So I host 2 book clubs at Red Deer Public Library. One is Happy Ever After, which is a romance-themed book club, which is my favorite genre to read in normal times. So it took me a little while to get that one off the ground floor, but now I have about 5 to 7 dedicated participants who obviously over time, again, like Jenna was saying, we do become friendly. It's not just, you know, you're meeting with your book club, you're meeting with friends and you're chatting about everything, not just the book, which is lovely, and you get to know people. And the other one that I host here at the library is called Any Book Club, which would be quite similar, I think, in terms of getting recommendations as Anne's. So we all read whatever we are reading over the month. And then when we come and we meet, we'll talk about, you know, I loved these 4, but I really didn't like this one, or I read this one and I'm certain that, you know, it's what we always say is a Sarah book, it's a safe ending, and, you know, that sort of thing. So we do know each other and we get recommendations through each other, because at this point, I think we've been meeting now. I've been hosting for 5 years, I think. So we've become, you know, quite, you know, friendly and close, and we have a group chat and we have a Facebook page, and we share things throughout the month as well. And Trish has joined us actually during COVID because she was able to start coming to the meetings because it didn't conflict with schedule anymore, which was really nice as well. So switching from in-person to online has been a bit of a challenge, but I really do enjoy sort of the community that the book clubs have created, like particularly in my life, but hopefully in the other participants' lives as well.
So when do those 2 clubs meet, Claire?
So Happy Ever After meets the last Monday of every month, and we choose the books in quarters. So we choose them for the 3 months to give everyone sort of the opportunity to either borrow or procure in some other way the title. And then Any Book meets the second Thursday of every month. And these are both year round. Happy Ever After, excuse me, sometimes takes the summer off, but we didn't this summer because none of us were going anywhere. So we thought might as well chit chat with each other. So we did meet year round this year, but Any Book has always met year round.
And so the one that's every other Thursday, is that a daytime club or an evening club?
Sorry, they're both evening clubs, and Any Book meets the second Thursday of every month, not every second Thursday. Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. Now, I'm sure that I'm not sure, but I would imagine that if you have a certain book list that you're suggesting for a 3-month period, that you would say, well, there are 3 libraries in town. You could probably get them from there, some of them, but maybe not everybody would be able to get them. Are there places in Red Deer that you would suggest to purchase books if there's a certain title that is upcoming and you say, well, I know that I've got one out from the library because I get first dibs or whatever?
So I actually never borrow the Happy Ever After book club from the library. I always personally purchase my copy and will share. Like my mom's a part of that book club, so it goes from me to my mom or my mom to me, whichever way. I'm usually reading it the Sunday before, if I'm being honest. And all my book club people know that, so I should just tell the truth. And the library, Trish is so great. I will email her after we've chosen our topics and I'll say, Trish, these are the ones. Can you get extra copies? Can you get an e-book? Can you get an e-audio? Can we have maybe an extra print? And she is on top of it ASAP. So we get it pretty quickly. But also I have to say with Happy Ever After, because it's just for fun, if you don't love the book, you don't have to read it. That is not one of the rules for joining Happy Ever After book club, because sometimes it's just you're not in the mood, you don't like the book, it's a slog, whatever it is, it's not one of the rules. Happy ever after is if you liked the book, come. If you didn't like the book, come. If you couldn't read the book, come. Like, just come and be a part of the romance book club.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to do is put a plug out for places like the Nearly New bookstore in town that sells books that have been repurposed. The Salvation Army has a bookshelf. The Mission, used to be called Bibles for Missions, has books. Value Village has books. There was Books on the Bus, which is now not working these days. I take lots and lots of books to the food bank because they just put them out with all the food that they have there, and they just disappear. So there are, and I don't know if I've missed any. Well, chapters, of course. I don't know if I've missed any places in Red Deer itself. And I know a lot of the people that may be watching are not from Red Deer, they're from Olds, from Didsbury, Lacombe, central Alberta, but getting access to books. And of course, Audible books, you can get through Audible, or you can get through, I guess, the Parkland Regional Library for those of, and they draw from all over Alberta. Is that correct, Trish?
Yes, in terms of Parkland. Now, we are not part of Parkland, of course, but yeah, we're our own system. So,
Right.
but those that are in Olds or Innisfail or some other areas are definitely part of the Parkland system.
Okay. Well, I live in the county, and that's the bane of my existence in that regard, because I would love to be a member of the Red Deer Public Library, but I can't be because I am 2 miles out into the grand beyond.
So sorry, Jock. I will just say you can be a part of Red Deer Public Library. So you can get a library card through Parkland Regional, because I imagine you're in the county. So Sylvan Lake, Lacombe, Innisfail, Penhold, etc. And then you can sign up with melibraries.ca to borrow with us then, just using your Parkland Regional Library card.
But there is one restriction, I think, and that's that I don't think I can get audiobooks, can I?
You can get physical materials from us. You just can't use e-materials from us. So any physical material we have in the library, you would be welcome to borrow. But unfortunately, our borrowing agreements don't allow for ebooks or e-audiobooks.
Right. Okay. I knew there was a hitch there someplace. Before we leave your particular, who haven't I spoken to yet? Priscilla. What's happening with your book club? You're muted.
I'm fortunate to have just taken over a book club called the Fireside Readers Book Club at Red Deer Public Library. It's the previous host for that club did it for 15 years, and she took it over from somebody else. So it's quite an old book club, and it's evolved a lot over the years. And currently, it is meeting online, but previously it was meeting at the downtown branch of Red Deer Public Library, the third Wednesday of the month at 6:30. There's some members that have been attending for those whole 15 years. There's no restrictions on the type of books that they want to read: fiction, nonfiction, classics, hot topics. And how they do it is the June meeting, all the members bring their suggestions of books they think would be good to discuss, and they try and sell them to the rest of the members. And then at the end of that June meeting, they have a vote, and those are the books that they read for the coming season.
Wow.
And so we actually met last night via Zoom, and was a very in-depth discussion. And just like you were saying, they know each other really well, and they know what questions to ask each other. And I didn't have to do very much work, that's for sure. It was a joy to listen to them enjoy talking with each other about books.
Have you Zoomed since March?
Yeah, yes, actually last evening. That was our first meeting in September. So we did, the book was Where the Crawdads Sing, about the marsh girl.
Yes.
And
yeah.
I don't know if anyway. And one of the ladies belongs to another book club, and they'd also chosen that book this month. So she had lots of insight from the other book club too. So anyway, it's a delight. And it's nice that it's been going for so long, because often book clubs have an arc, you start and they I don't know, they do really well and then somehow they peter out. But this one has managed to keep going for a very long time.
But have you met, Priscilla? Did you meet in April and May and June via Zoom or?
Yes, yes.
So
And that was a big ask for lots of these members, but they made it work. Helped each other practice Zooming in between so that they would be able to do it.
did you lose anybody?
It just means so much to them to get together and have some continuity with all the change in the world. That's one of the things they said. What a relief it was to see these familiar faces and know that even if you're not meeting in person, you are still getting that social contact.
Did you lose anybody because you went to an online meeting?
Well, actually, we gained people. So there was people that we had kept on our email list, and they had moved away, and they, because we were Zooming, they joined us. So that was really good.
How far away did some of them move to and come back to you?
Vancouver Island was the furthest away.
Wow, that's great. And Trish, even though you don't, I guess you're in a book club, but do you have any thoughts for us on changes to book clubs over the last 6 months?
I guess just watching them mostly go online, and I do have a Facebook group that is sort of a book club. It's called Read Outside Your Comfort Zone, and we do themes every month, either as nice or as nasty as I can get, depending on what month it happens to be. I am sure there are sometimes that people think that I've just pulled one out of my hat or something like that. So,
For example, what would some of your themes be?
this month, we are reading books with 4 words in the title. So,
Where the crawdads sing. Okay.
yeah, there you go. I read The Chocolate Maker's Wife. So, and other ones, have been last October. We did ones that were, because it's library month, we did ones that were either about books, booksellers, or librarians, some of the things like that. We've read books about war or a blue book, on the month that I decide to be nice and just have you go out and look for those. So, and yes, I'm in Claire's book club now, and I've got another one, but yeah, definitely. I mean, we all went virtual for a while, and I have one book club that is meeting, but it's meeting in a backyard, right? With a lot of social distancing.
This gal that I chatted with this morning finally had her, I think it's 7-member book club, meet down by the museum, and she said it was great. They brought their lawn chairs, they just sat outside, but they kept having to move because as the sun progressed across the sky, it was one of those warm days we've had of late, and they just wanted to stay in the sun and not be shivering in the shade, because without it, it's pretty cool. With your theme, if you say a blue book, does that mean I can read a blue book, Claire can read a different blue book, Anne reads a different blue book, and when we get together, we sing the blues together?
Well, pretty much what we do is, because we don't have any meetings at all, it's all just done on the Facebook page, and just people saying, I read this or I read that.
Okay.
Is how it is. And, we have about 96 members in the group right now. That's been fairly stable, I think, for the last few months. We haven't had anybody else join, and they're fairly silent people. I think they just go out and they do their thing, but they don't like to tell you what book they've read. But there are a few that do. They don't pop on and tell you what they've read very often. I'm not getting 96 members that are telling me what they've read.
Okay, so, and what is that called again, if somebody wanted to join that?
It's the Read Outside Your Comfort Zone, and it's a group through the Red Deer Public Library on the Facebook page.
Okay, that's great. I just want, before we move on to tips and tricks and things like that, is that, Anne, you mentioned the idea of connecting with an author. And I know that at the prison, or the institution, I guess it's called, that we are allowed through the finances of Book Club for Inmates, which has, I think at the moment, 34 clubs across the country in both women's, men's, maximum, medium, minimum. There are a number of Indigenous, there's a different name for it. I forget what it's called. There's one up at Masquachis, which is not, it's not an institution or a prison, but it's people that are incarcerated in some fashion. Simply, it's a volunteer organization, so they don't have a lot of money. And the two authors that I've talked to locally haven't asked for any money. Do any of you have any connections with or thoughts about having an author be part of your book club? Priscilla.
So for several years, we've had at least one author visit. It started out many years ago where it was just a phone call, and it's, of course, moved on to Zoom or something else, Skype. And some of the authors we've had more than once. So this January, Kathy Marie Buchanan is coming back for the third time with her new book, Daughter of Black Lake. And when I emailed her to ask her if she could come, she said, yes, when? Tomorrow? No. So she was so keen to be coming back to this book club. It was a wonderful thing. And actually, initially we looked for authors. There's lists of authors that the publishers say will come to book clubs. But eventually we realized we just contacted the publishers for the authors that we wanted. And pretty much all of them have said yes. And it's the wonderful thing. Yeah, it's a very memorable event. And I recommend it to everybody.
Thank you. Anybody else have a thought in that regard? Anne.
I kind of avoid having the author too involved in our discussions, because I feel like people can't be honest if they know that the author's there. And so that's why I've never really invited an author to be part of the discussion, even though sometimes publishers will offer. And because I'm the one leading the discussion, and a lot of times I do like the book, but I'll specifically pick points that I'm critical of to try to guide the discussion and get more people talking, and get more people involved. So I feel like I wouldn't be able to do that if the author was listening. The nature of the discussion would change drastically, right? In my book club, I'm picking the book apart. I'm talking about things I didn't like, things I did like, characters we hated. And, when the author visits, it's very different. It's people asking the author questions. Everyone's being extra nice. And I just don't want that in my book club. I want us to all just be honest.
Well, my experience, I'm in a Toastmasters club here in town, and we have impromptu speaking, and it's changed a little bit. What we have prepared speeches, and they are all evaluated. And one of the things that we stress constantly is that nobody benefits from a whitewash. And at least those people are, I think, used to the fact that it's kind of maybe 3 positives to 1 suggestion. And in a book club, I'm not sure if most groups of groups have an individual in them that's I'm going to tell it like it is kind of a person. So that's a good thing. Let's maybe go to Jenna for a minute, because Jenna, you not only are you a book club member, but you are an author. So have you worn both hats?
Yeah, I've worn both hats. I was laughing actually because all 4 of us in the book club that I'm part of are all authors. And I think that's one of the things we've actually come to really enjoy, is when we're able to have another writer join us, because we feel like it ends up being part like a constructive criticism group and also a book club group. So you get the discussion about the book, and then also there's that why did you do it this way? And what were you thinking when you did this? So it ends up being a bit of a workshop in there as well. I really enjoy that. we've got to know a lot of writers as well as, you know, as readers of their work. So that's been kind of cool.
I wonder if it wouldn't be helpful in some instances, maybe the 11 other meetings a year, if you have an author once a year, is to suggest that I think it would be fun in our book club if we said to the men, let's pretend that the author is here. What would you ask them? What is it? Those kinds of questions. Why that ending? Why that situation? What, you didn't tell us this. I didn't understand that. Or, and maybe if that would help them if the person really did come. Priscilla.
So that has been the general experience that we've had, actually. People that, authors that are willing to come to a little book club generally aren't too precious, I guess. And they're just pleased that you've read the book and that you have questions and that, you know, like, and so I don't think we've had a bad experience, but maybe it's because they self-select for people that are willing to take a little bit of criticism, maybe, or I don't know. That certainly that's been our experience.
Well, my experience has been that I think some people put authors on a pedestal, and then when they come rolling in there, they realize, hey, they're just folks. You know, they may not be good tennis players. They may not be able to play bridge or golf or have a good memory or remember who won that Stanley Cup last year. They write, and they love to write, and they most often love to read, and they're just people. And I don't know that any of us are inviting the, you know, the, who's the guy that I'm always trying to think of? It'll come to me later. I'm too old, I forget. So maybe we can segue into the last part, and this is the tips and tricks of book clubs. How do you do this? How does that happen? I have a few notes here. So I said, how to adapt or in some cases, start a book club in these challenging times. And I think we know that if you've ever been to an RV dealership, they're sold right out because everybody's decided to be a camper. If you go to buy bird seed, it's almost impossible because everybody's decided they're staying at home and they should be feeding the chickadees and the redpolls and so on and so forth. There are a number of things that you just can't do anymore because everybody else is doing it because they're generally stuck at home. So maybe, and Anne, I think, alluded to this, is that people are reading more and maybe reading differently. And is it the time to start a book club? In the same vein, have you found that there's Zoom and then there is Zoom with the chat room, there's Zoom with polls, there's Zoom with sharing screens. There's a whole lot more to it than maybe some people are aware of. So let's just, and there are some older folk. My brother's has a group of fellows that they call themselves the senators, and they're in Olds, and they meet, most of them on Zoom. They used to meet in a coffee shop, but these old guys, older than I am, and I wasn't born yesterday, they've just adapted and adopted this, and they're just all over it like white on rice. Some people have buddied up. Some people actually phone each other now and talk about the books because they haven't mastered the Zoom or the Facebook Live or whatever it is. Can we start with, have I forgotten anybody from our last go round? Trish, I think I talked to everybody. Let's start with Anne again. What would you give from your, I guess, technological online book club, tips and tricks, things that work for you that you could suggest that might work well for others?
I mean, as I said before, giving the book club members the option of what they're going to read next, instead of me just saying, this is what we're reading. It's a bit of a democracy. I try to engage the members regularly throughout the month. Like, usually I'll post links to other bookish things that I find interesting. But I'll also, when I finish reading the book, which is usually just a few days before the meeting, I'll post like my reaction to it. And people are always really eager to just write their reaction. So yeah, I think if you're using like a social media platform for your book club, to just engage with it regularly, at least once a week in between your actual meetings. And it kind of keeps people interested, reminds them about the book. And personally, and it's not a tip that I like to mention too often, because I'm an advocate for the publishing industry. But I found in my, I used to host an in-person book club with WordFest here in Calgary too. And I've made the mistake of trying to choose a book from a small press. And we've had real problems getting that book, like the copies being available, people being able to find it online. And so I tend to pick books from larger publishers now. I try to do, Canadian as much as possible, but depending on the size of your book club, just make sure that you're picking a book that everyone can easily get a copy of.
Okay, and on that note, I have behind me here a number of books that are self-published books. And I know that most people who self-publish have lots of them. and that's a sad fact. But either they're just printed, or they may have fallen prey to one of the companies that offers to publish your book for you. And I've heard some unhappy stories about how much that costs. But whenever they do self-publish, they end up with lots of them on hand, it seems. Is it possible and maybe any of you can respond to this, do any of you do books that are not from even a small publisher, but that are self-published? I don't see any hands waving.
Well, I think I would just speak to Anne's point as well. We want, like, when we choose our book for Happy Ever After, we want it to be the most accessible book, a book that we can get in the library quickly, a book that we can circulate, a book that we can get an ebook copy through our Overdrive provider, like our ebook provider. So for a personal book club, I wouldn't be opposed to choosing a self-published or a small published. But in terms of like the library book club, I would be a little bit hesitant, because I do want people to have the opportunity to easily get their hands on the book in whichever way speaks to them, whether that's an e-audio or an ebook or print or an audio, like a physical audiobook.
Right. Anybody else have a thought on that note? Jenna.
We have done some chapbooks in the past, just because sometimes I find that depending on the author, they come from a community that doesn't necessarily have much voice in the larger publishing industry. Sometimes there's some really interesting texts out there, but you're not going to find anything by some of these authors, or sometimes they're new authors and they haven't gotten enough for a full collection yet. So we have done chapbooks in the past, and I find particularly with like poetry chapbooks, usually the publishers, because they are micro presses, they're usually really excited when people are reading the books. And so they've been fairly quick to get them to us. But again, we're a very small book club. So that definitely has an impact on what we're able to read, for sure.
So maybe just for those who aren't familiar with the term, can you describe, I'll show one as an example here, a chap book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's usually 30 pages or under, right? It's sort of like often like a hand sewn or hand designed. You see it a lot in poetry, but sometimes in short fiction, little tiny collection. And there are all these micro presses across Canada that are doing some pretty cool experimental stuff.
Anne, you had a thought there?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the way my book club is structured too, I only give the members a month to read and source the book, which is another reason why I tend to pick larger publishers. But if you're part of a book club that picks their books a few months out, I would encourage people to buy or to choose books from small independent presses, because that's plenty of time but it's usually like people are scrambling to find the book within like a week or two, which is why I tend to pick like major, more popular books, like books that you can find in like Shoppers Drug Mart.
Right. And I think that's an issue as well, is that there are a number of small presses in Alberta alone. And I think that a lot of people will go to the Globe and Mail and see what their books are, or maybe they might go to Goodreads online or something and say, okay, what are the most popular books? But there are so many people that have written excellent books out there. And if we all rely on, if we do what everybody else is doing, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And if we're always reading what everybody else is reading, I think we're missing a great deal. So I just would throw that out there. Okay, moving on. What are some other things that you think might be advantageous to people in book clubs? We know that, well, there's always the person who talks too much. I think sometimes we may err on the side of being too democratic and getting our little stop timer out and saying everybody has 2 minutes. And there are some people I know in our book club who don't like to talk. They prefer to listen, they absorb, they occasionally, if something really important strikes them, they will throw their opinion in. But let's maybe worry about those who talk too much. Do you have any of you that have actual live book clubs figured out a way how to deal with that other than doing this? Priscilla.
Well, so that's the beauty of having somebody like me that's not, my job is to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk, and it moves around the group, and that doesn't happen. So small book clubs that don't have one person that can sort of do that, that is a challenge. I've belonged to book clubs like that where it can be quite difficult, and where people get off topic. They're talking about everything but the book, which really frustrates me. Anyway, so that's an advantage. A book club hosted by someone like Claire, like she does that too, right? So there's an advantage to joining a book club where there is a sort of a host or a facilitator, or someone at least that was willing to take that role. One book club I belonged to, whoever's house was at, they were in charge of making sure everybody talked. So more important than the food even.
Wow. Anybody else have some thoughts in that regard? Either to get somebody not to speak as much, or somebody to, some people are extremely deep thinkers, and it takes them a while to put their thoughts into words. And if we gave them the opportunity and maybe a little push, we would get some more out of them. And when they do speak, it's, whoa, man, that was terrific. Claire.
So just sort of expanding on Priscilla's point, as the facilitator, so any book club, when we meet in person, we can be as many as 17 or 18. So we do have a very real routine of like how we start, and that I'm always the last one, because if there's, if we run out of time and I don't get to speak, that's fine too. So we move it along the circle, and we literally sit in a circle at the back of Timberlands. And I always bring treats because I am a big proponent of treats everywhere. And we just go around the circle, and like new people, I try to sort of ask them if they don't come knowing what any book club is, and they say, like, I didn't bring anything, or I'm not prepared. It's, what genres do you enjoy reading? Is there a book that you would say is one of your favorites? That sort of thing, to sort of get them comfortable with the conversation. And then with Happy Ever After, as the facilitator, we always start off the same way. And some book clubs find this controversial, but we always start off with, what would you give it out of 5? And you can do point whatever you like. You can be extremely, extremely specific. You can be, 4.73. Whatever you like. So we start off sort of to gauge where everybody is with the book. Did you really like it? Did you maybe not? Was it fine for you? Was it great for you? And then we can have conversations around that. But sort of having that routine of how we meet and how we start our discussions each time has really helped with the book clubs that I host, I would say. And I would hope that our participants would say that as well.
Do you often ask at the end of the meeting if their opinion has changed?
So for any book, no, we just talk about our books that we've read, and there's questions, sort of, there's interplay between the members as well during those discussions. And then for Happy Ever After, at the end, it's, would you read this author again? Would you, and like, that's usually the last question is, would you read this author again? Because that sort of gauges a lot. Like if you started as maybe, this was a 3 for me, this was fine. And I love a fine book, that like fine is good. But if you, at the end, you're like, you know what, I am gonna find something else from that author. I feel like that is sort of indicative of whether perhaps some points were brought up that they could look for in other works from that particular author.
I just asked that question because we've had a number of our members at the end of the meeting say, oh, I would have given that a 3, or I gave it a 3. We don't do that in ours, and I'm trying to think of the reasons why we don't. But at the end of the meeting, they'll go, oh, gee, I didn't get that. I didn't see that part. I didn't understand that. It didn't even occur to me that that had happened. And either I'm going to read it again, or in some cases, they haven't read it all, and they will read it. We say that you must read the book. There are people that want to get into it. We're restricted to 14 members. And if we've got people that are just coming for the treats, or they fill the idle moment, that doesn't cut it because there's a waiting list. But still in all, some people sneak in not having read the book. So anybody else have thoughts about things? I'll just open it up generally. Suggestions for other book clubs, how to do something or how not to do something.
I would say, like, if you wanted to start a book club just in your personal life, that start with something that you love, and then try to find people who love that also. It's easier to start something if you have sort of a common ground between members. And perhaps that's with Jenna's point, she knew people perhaps professionally and as acquaintances, but through this shared love of land books, which is amazing. I love that. You find like real friendship and real community. So I would say start with something at the center like that.
Excellent idea. Thank you. Jenna.
I was just thinking something that's come up for us, particularly since COVID started, is accessibility. So I know that we've switched online, but depending on where our members are, and again, we're a really small book club, so we have more ability to do this, but switching the means by which we meet. So we've got one member who is part-time. She goes back to her reserve in Northern BC. And when she's up there, she can't Zoom. Right. And so thinking about how everyone can take part, because people still do want to talk about what they're reading. They still, especially they want that sense of community, but we go backwards and forwards. So sometimes it's a conference call, and sometimes when we can, it's Zoom. And I'm sure at some point when we're all in the same area, maybe it'll be socially distanced outside somewhere, but just thinking about that too.
What are some of the other choices? Because all I know is Zoom.
Like Zoom or Skype.
Skype, I guess.
Yeah.
So both of my book clubs that I host through Red Deer Public Library actually meet through Google Meet. That's just, it's been very easy for us to join. We started Skype for the first 2 rounds, but Skype did not love me. We were not best friends. It's probably not Skype's fault. It was definitely me. So Google Meet works for Happy Ever After and for any book. So, and it's accessible to anyone. You don't have to have necessarily a Gmail to be a part of that. But I love the idea that Jenna was having of having perhaps a conference call. We have a member of Any Book Book Club who's been a member since before I hosted, and she decided that she was not into the idea of an online meeting, and her voice has very much been missed during our meetings because she brings a different perspective, and we definitely notice her missing. So the idea of perhaps trying something different, thank you very much for that suggestion, Jenna. I really do enjoy that. So perhaps one of our future meetings for Any Book will have to be a conference call style meeting.
has anybody ever thought of, this is a little bit old school, writing a letter? I mean, if you have your friend who's in northern British Columbia and is totally out of the loop, if you had a meeting, maybe it would be like notes, the minutes of the meeting, and send it to her and say, this is what you missed. But I have a grandson who I write to on the first of every month. He's 5 years old and he lives in British Columbia as well. And it's just a bit of an event to get a letter from Grandpa once a month. And I don't think anybody thinks of that anymore. It always has a special stamp on it. And it always has a little something extra in the envelope along with the letter. So just a thought. Well, we have kind of, I guess, covered most of the bases, but there are probably things that I either haven't thought of or if I thought of and forgot. I did look at one of the results from the survey, and that was what people had done with their book clubs. One book club said they just stopped. Now, I don't know how current these results are, but one of them just said, that's it, we're done. Another one said that we went to Zoom or Facebook or something like that. And 56% of them, 9 of the clubs that responded said they'd done that. 6 of the clubs said that they meet outside when they can, and that's going to end pretty soon, unless they're a whole lot tougher than I am. Some said that they discussed, 3 clubs said that they discussed them via email. So I guess if you have an email that goes to multiple people, you don't have to just correspond one-on-one. You can send it to a group of people. Some people have said that they have met, 2 groups said they have in-person meetings with provision for social distancing. Some stopped and then started with in-person meetings, and those were the results from the groups. What have I forgotten? Book clubs, Central Alberta, people sharing ideas. Any other thoughts, ladies? I'll just go around the horn. I'll start with Trish. What would you like to conclude with, Trish?
Can I give you guys a few of our Red Deer Public Library statistics for reading over its time period? We, of course, had a period where we didn't have any physical books going out. So our ebooks and our e-audio statistics went up quite high. And we had a lot of new users that were introduced to some of our e-audio books. During the period of March 17th to May 26th, the most popular title was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, because we had a page that went that had that as a topic. And since we've gone back and opened up for our curbside, we've had approximately over 15,000 checkouts. So in physical books. So people love their books. I think that's whether that's an ebook, e-audio, audiobook, physical, print. It's so nice to see people reading.
Can I just jump in there and say that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's every Friday between 11 and 12 o'clock, the library is open for donations for people many people are cleaning out their bookshelves in their garages and their basements and places like that.
Yes, that is correct. And at the downtown branch.
Right. And normally, and that's they can only come in or drop them off at the table that's on the south side.
Yes.
And there isn't going to be, as there normally is, a spring and a fall book sale in the basement, but Leslie Caddy and a number of volunteers are sorting them and bagging them and selling them. And I think right now is one of the sales, and you can buy an entire bag full of books, and they're sorted by genre. So it can be American Westerns or Canadian, Western Canadian history or fantasy or children's literature or whatever. a whole bag of books for $10. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct. Does that sound correct to you, Priscilla and Claire? And they're at the North Door. I'm not quite sure of the hours. Claire, Priscilla, do you have any idea of the hours?
So they are available to purchase Monday through Thursday from 11 to 1 at our, I'm very bad, at our North stores, like the ones that open into the park for those like me who don't do North and South.
Right. Okay. So just a little plug for those guys. And any other last thoughts, Jenna?
I don't know. I think the one thing that just we've been trying to do is, because of the switch to online, trying to have the sense of connection and community that we used to have when we met in person. Just trying to have the book club be a space where you do get that sense of escape in the same way. And it sounds really goofy. Remember, I talked about the book club snacks. One of the things that we've been doing, again, small group, when we meet and we're able to do it over Zoom and see each other, we all make ourselves our favorite meal beforehand. And then, we share a meal together, and then we talk shop, we talk about our books. So that's been really neat. And that just kind of gives you that sense of that community that so often I think we're missing and we're really kind of longing for. So.
True. And while you have the floor, can you tell us either what you're writing right now and what other books you have written and published?
Oh, man. I have a book that's coming out next month. Oh my God. It's called Reverie, A Year of Bees, and it's about beekeeping and climate grief and trauma recovery on a northern small farm. So kind of coming to terms with all of that through the lens of a beekeeper, a new beekeeper, 5 years. And I've got 5 other books, poetry, essays, predominantly.
And we were talking about presses. Are yours small presses, large presses? Where is it available from?
Predominantly small presses and university presses. So U of A Press is my publisher, mostly for my poetry. New West Press in the past, another Alberta press, and Woolsack and Wind does my essays. They're out of Toronto.
Great. Thanks very much. Priscilla, last words from you and the Fireside Club.
Well, I just actually wanted to talk about the Book Club Jamboree that we had last year. And what I really was impressed with was we asked people to sign up to come to that jamboree. That was when we got to meet in person here at the library. And we got phone calls from all over Central Alberta from people so keen to sign up and tell us the name of their book club, and which is always a big deal, right? And how they got started, and they just were so eager to share. So I think that just indicated what a wonderful thing it is. And there was mother-daughter book clubs and, everything under the sun. A club where they were only reading books by Irish people. Like there's just no limit. And I think what Claire said is true. You just find something you love, and I'm sure you'll find somebody else that loves it too.
Is there a way, Priscilla, that you know of, or anybody else here on the panel, that people watching this could learn about the book club that's in Big Valley, or the book club that's in Torrington, or in wherever, small town or not Red Deer, Alberta?
That's a very good question. I don't have a good answer to that, because I was surprised how all these book clubs came kind of out of the woodwork, that I thought in the library world I'd probably heard of them all, and I didn't know them at all. So I don't have an answer to that.
Well, maybe the answer might be, and I'm just guessing here, is that if the recording of this chat that we've had this evening goes onto YouTube and is available there, I think that almost all YouTube presentations that I have seen have an option to comment. And if people are from those clubs and comment and say, hey, the question was asked, what are the other book clubs? Well, we've got the happy-go-lucky left-handed plumbers from Olds, Alberta, or something. Okay, thanks so much. Anne, what have you got for us?
I think it's just good to keep in mind that, you know, book clubs are for fun. And so if you find yourself, you know, if you're the organizer of a book club and you find yourself like not looking forward to it anymore, then you're doing something wrong or something has gone astray. So just always keep that in mind, right? This is for people's enjoyment. And that doesn't mean you can't talk about serious issues, but the meeting of people and the club itself should be for adding something to your life, not taking it away, or not something that you feel like you just have to do. It shouldn't be a chore. So just keep that in mind, and you should have a very successful book club.
Thank you so much. And Claire.
I would just say my final thoughts are, and people can also comment here on the video as well. If you are in a small town, you're looking for reader kinship, perhaps someone else from your small town is here. But I would just say, I'm going to plug libraries. Connect with your local library space. Connect with, you know, college libraries, etc. They might know of other groups that are meeting. So if you don't know where to start with finding people that love what you love, those places can be really great places to start, and they're open to everybody. So I would say start there.
Well, and I would like to make my final comment be that if you ladies would all remind people on this site, if possible, the Fireside Club, the Happy Ever After ending, et cetera, and I've read this, so on, just tell us when they are, how they can get involved, because, or if you're full up, and thank you very much, but we don't want any more members. I don't think I heard anybody say that. So that would be my hope. And I will go my merry way. I myself am currently writing a book. I was lucky enough to get a Canada Council grant. I'm working with local author Sigmund Brouwer. So my fingers are crossed that something will be happening soon. Who knows? So if and when it ever happens, I'd be happy to come to any of your book clubs and eat your chocolate chip cookies and drink your coffee, and life would be grand. There are a couple of additional videos, I'm told, and we don't seem to have all of the information on that, my bad. But if anybody goes to YouTube and goes to the Red Deer Public Library, puts that in as a search, they should be able to find out some more about books and book things. And maybe Claire, you can clear that up a little bit for us.
So if you visit our Red Deer Public Library YouTube page, there will be 2 videos that have been uploaded. They premiered, I think, around 6 o'clock. And they are all local, mostly Alberta authors, talking about their works and where you might be able to find them. So maybe you're going to find your next great read in one of those videos. So definitely join us over on our YouTube page.
Thank you very, very much. And with that, I will say hasta la vista, ciao, arrivederci. It's about the limit of my multilingualism. So thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.